So I always come back to that. If you're getting the results you want and you're blissfully happy with your life, keep doing it. If you're not, then you might like to try a couple of these things that lots of people find, very useful and practical, and that they work.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be fantastic. In fact, it's going to be a fun one because our guest is from down under. Our guest is an Australian productivity expert and author of The One Day Refund, Take Back Time, Spend It Wisely. Donna McGeorge, welcome to the show.
Hello, Michael. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. And I love Australia. I love the people from Australia. And I'm so always amazed at the view of life that Australians have. And so I'm looking forward to learning your take on productivity. And I absolutely love the name of your book. But before we get into all of that, Donna, please tell us a little bit about you and your career journey up to this point.
Well, I've had a pretty varied career. I started out as a secretary a long time ago, and I think that's probably what got me on the path of staying on top of things and being all productive. Then after that, I worked for an airline. I spent a bit of time being an e-commerce consultant in the late 90s when it was super sexy playing around in the e-commerce space. And then for the last 20 years, I've been in my own practice as a speaker, facilitator, presenter, and then kind of more recently an author. And I would say probably the early part of my career was fully in corporate settings, but following the third redundancy in my career, I decided to take matters into my own hands. And this has been the most stable employer. I've been my most stable employer over the last 20 years. It's been great.
Amazing. And so you were in e-commerce. Well, e-commerce definitely is still sexy, I think. A lot of people are still talking about it, but you were involved early days. So tell us about this career. You've been speaking or productivity expert. How did you stumble upon that?
Look, I reckon it's probably because I was raised in a military household. And so my dad, he's had a big influence. I probably think about it more now than I did as a kid. I probably notice it more now. But when you're raised in a military household, there's a lot of things you do probably unconsciously that other families or people don't. So you're very conscious that you're going to move around, and so you've got to adapt really quickly to new settings. Because you're moving house a lot, you run a pretty lean household. You don't accumulate stuff. Very punctual, structured, organized way of viewing the world. And I think because my dad was in the Navy, we had some really cool sayings in our house, like, you're always heading for a ship that's sailing. And if you miss the ship, it's a long swim home. So all of these things kind of play around in your head as, there's rules and routines and rituals that you follow in order to lead a satisfactory life, if you will. And I think that's had a bit of an influence on me. But the interesting thing is, even though my dad was in the military, in the Navy, he was a musician in the military. So I also learned enough about the go with the flow, the flexible, all the stuff that goes with musician lifestyle coupled with Navy lifestyle meant that I can still be fun, and mix things up and be flexible and all of that, but within the realms of structure. And I think that's, why you find me here today, having written a bunch of books on productivity and being asked to speak on podcasts, probably because of my Navy background, or my dad's Navy background.
Wow. It's very interesting in terms of that mix. And I recently had a guest on the podcast who had a significant career in the U.S. Army and had gone through into leadership in the military, and then brought that into his own bookkeeping business. And when I say that, his way of being, I guess, and he's done very well. He's very successful, and he's been able to execute on his plan quickly and effectively, and brought so much to it. So often I think we forget about our upbringing or our past in terms of how it prepares us for a life. And your dad gave you a mix of both this structure as well as the art form of music.
Absolutely. And I do think we underestimate all of that unconscious stuff. And sometimes it plays to our advantage and sometimes it doesn't. There's always a history. Everyone's got a history, right? And it's a matter of really, I think, and in the case of the story you just told about the ex-army person, I think there's a discipline that comes from the military that we underestimate. The ability to do the things that you don't really want to do, but you just get on with doing them. And I'm extremely grateful that I was exposed to that so early, and it's played out and it's served me really well.
It's an interesting topic, and I've often heard like even productivity training. Some of the objections I've heard over the years to people to talking about it or taking, getting better at it is that they don't want to follow a rule, a structure, and whenever I've heard that, it's like, okay, I get that. But at the same time, that's kind of how the universe works. It does need to have, at some point, there needs to be something has to get done. And yet people resist sometimes doing what needs to be done. And if you're not willing to do what needs to be done, then how can you expect to have something done? What's your take on all of that, and how has that flowed into how you work with people?
Well, the thing I always ask people is what you're doing working? So if you're not following a routine and you're a bit all over the place and you don't use any productivity tools and your business is wildly successful and you're always getting stuff done that you want to and you're not overwhelmed and out of control and you're succeeding in all the important things in your life, then I'm going to say go forth and keep doing what you're doing, follow your own rules, dance to your own tune, whatever you want to do, because it's working for you. If, however, you aren't getting the results you want, or, you are maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed or out of control and you are at risk of failing at the important things, then you might like to just tweak a few of the things that you do in your world. So, if anyone ever pushes back to me and says, oh, I never do to-do lists, I don't believe in them, I say, well, do you get everything done that you need to? And they say, yes. I'm like, well, all power to you. But if you're not getting everything done that you need to, then maybe to-do lists might be a useful strategy for you to use. So I always come back to that. If you're getting the results you want and you're blissfully happy with your life, keep doing it. If you're not, then you might like to try a couple of these things that lots of people find, very useful and practical, and that they work.
Beautiful. Let's get into some of those things. I mean, the title of your book, The One Day Refund, Take Back Time, Spend It Wisely. Tell us a little bit about that book and the title and how that relates back to productivity.
So it really came out of the pandemic. So like you and many of your listeners, we had a pretty bumpy couple of years, 2020 and 2021. And if any of your listeners are aware of what happened down in Australia, we had some of the strictest lockdowns in the world. So lots of us pretty much spent 2 years in some version of either isolation or pretty strict conditions. And it meant that a large percentage, anyone that could, worked from home. And I know that's true for other countries as well. So anyone that could pretty much was working from home. And I started to ask people what they did with their commute time, because in most of the Australian cities, the average door-to-door commute is about an hour. And so they got 2 hours a day that they pretty much got back. They were refunded, if you will. And if you added that up over a week, it was about 10 hours. And I would say to people, what did you do with that time? And they'd look at me a bit sheepishly and say, oh, I just did more emails. I just it got subsumed into my work. I just started my day earlier and finished it a bit later. And I thought that was a crying shame, because I think that one of the silver linings of the pandemic was that we did get a little bit of extra time back. We got a bit of refund back. And I'm not sure that people spent it wisely. And so that was really the inspiration for the book, is that, if I flipped it and if I'd asked you, Michael, or any of your listeners back in 2019, if I could give you a whole extra day back in your week, what would you do with it? I don't think anyone would have said more work, more emails, more projects. You probably all would have said something like, spend time with my family, working on my hobby, doing something that brings me joy. I might exercise, read extra books, take long weekends. There's a whole bunch of things you would have done. And yet we had 2 years where we had an opportunity to have a crack at that, to play with an extra day. And not many people did. So I kind of felt compelled to write a bit of a handbook or a field guide on how to spend that time more wisely when you get it back in your life.
I love it. It's so true. And I mean, constantly hear this conversation about life is short, and we're busy trying to get through life and get to somewhere. But then at the end of it all, it's like looking back, are the things that we're doing the ones that we actually are working really hard to go and do? Do we ever actually get to enjoy life the way we're working away to get there? And so it's a very valuable conversation. So if out of the book or out of some of your training, where do people start when it comes to, I mean, we talked about, if you're getting it all done, good, you write a book about it to share it with others. If not, what is it that you start to recommend people start with to take their productivity to a different level to get that day back?
Yeah, so this is not necessarily from this current book, but when anyone comes to me and says, I'm out of control, I'm at risk of failing the important things, I'm overwhelmed, and I feel like I just have not got any level of structure in my life, I always start at the end of the day, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, because a lot of people say, tomorrow or Monday I'm going to start, being amazing. And I say, no, it starts the night before. So if anyone really wants to know where to start, I'd say block out an hour at the end of your day today, or tomorrow if it's late in the day when you're listening to this or whatever. And I'd say between 4 and 5 o'clock, which is a classic, work day. And what are, 3 or 4 things you could do that afternoon that will mean tomorrow morning is an easier start? Now, it can be simple things. I'm assuming most of the listeners here, if they're bookkeepers, they're running their own business, they may be running it from home, maybe. Some of them may also be families and managing families, etc. So it doesn't have to be just work-related. It's what can I do in the last part of the day that makes tomorrow morning better? And so it can be anything from, if I have to travel, do I know the route? Have I got a route planned for that? Is there a couple of things I can prepare for meetings tomorrow? Do I know what I'm going to wear? I know that sounds really trite, but I always plan what I'm going to wear the night before, because it just, despite evidence to the contrary and having a full wardrobe, I can sometimes stand in front of it and go, I don't know, I've got nothing to wear. So I decide that the night before. If I've got family and particularly school-age kids, I'm going to be, what can I have organised this evening that means tomorrow morning when we get up, the school bags are packed, the lunches are made, any extracurricular activity equipment is already packed and good to go. Because if any of your listeners right now who have families like me know that 8 o'clock in the morning time can be crazy. I remember one time, getting in the car and my daughter turning around to me and saying, oh, sorry, I forgot. We have to take a scale model of the solar system as our project to school today, and suddenly running around like a crazy thing, painting, polystyrene balls so that they look like Jupiter. So you want to try and get ahead of all of that, because the cleaner your start to the day is, the better you're going to be overall. So it all starts the night before.
That's very good advice. And, I honestly think that just looking at my own life, we have young children. It can be just a chaos, really, in the morning, getting everybody ready, getting going, and all that good stuff. And I mean, we still live kind of in that pandemic age, which is a lot less is going on, and still it's chaotic. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to that nighttime planning, that's a new behavior, a new way of doing it. Like for me, I'm just even thinking about that. doing more in the evening to get prepared for the next day. And, it's the end of the day. I'm exhausted. What's the trigger point for people like myself where you go, you know what, I'm going to change my behavior. I'm going to give up the conversation of being tired at night so that I can plan the day the next day and be off on a better foot. And then maybe I won't be so tired the next night. But talking about it makes a lot of sense, but getting it done doesn't always happen.
It is the and I don't like using the D word, the discipline word, but there is the trigger for me is the time of day. So 4:00, I protect in my diary, in my schedule, and I did this even in the years I worked in corporate. I would always protect the last hour of the day, and in corporate, I thought I was protecting myself to get a clean departure at the end of the day, so that I could choose what time I knock off work. Whereas, if your calendar, particularly in corporates, if your calendar is left wide open, any blank time is up for grabs in corporates. So I used to protect and just had a regular meeting, recurring meeting between 4 and 5 every day that was just blocked out that no one could book. So I've had that habit for a long time. Really, it doesn't even have to be an hour. It could be 15 minutes. I refer to it as an hour of power. I just say, I turn everything off. I turn my email off, and unless I'm pounding through a couple of emails, which I sometimes do, but I'll just go, right, I just stop, and what have I got to do? So the trigger would be a clock, a time. You might even set a timer on your phone, an alarm, if you're wanting to get into this habit. And what you're really thinking, that the phrase that you want in your head is, what could I do now that my future self will thank me for? So I get that you're tired at the end of the day. I'm mentally drained. If I've had a day where like I had one earlier this week where I've just delivered, back-to-back webinars for the day, and it gets to about 4:00, and the last thing I feel like doing is, some of this stuff. But I say to myself, if I just do even 10 minutes or 15 minutes, even if I just look at my diary tomorrow and go, what have I got on? So I can mentally even prepare for the coaching clients or for, whatever bookings I have in that next day, that can even just be helpful. Even if little things like always have been, clean desk policy kind of gal. So even if the minimum that I do is tidy up my desk, clean up my cup of tea and put that in the kitchen, so when I come down the next morning, my desk is tidy, even just those simple things. So I'm going to suggest start small, and it might be clean desk, might be the only thing you can manage, is even that makes your following morning just that little bit easier. Now, just in case anyone's thinking, I work really well with big piles of paper and chaos everywhere, all power to you. And if you're doing great and life's good and you're winning and successful, keep doing it. There is a heap of research that says that tidy workspaces are productive workspaces.
I agree with you. I mean, it's I've had both. I've had both. And I'll tell you, when I come into a fresh, clean office with my desk all tidied and ready to go, it feels great. It really does. It's like, I think I used to have a postcard. Actually, I got that postcard in Australia at a market. It said a clean, what did it say? Now I can't even produce it, but it's the idea of that, a clean mind, a clean space produces a clean mind, something like that. Here it's the end of the day here when I'm losing my sharpness, but I really like what you've said about the end of the day, and it really all comes down to context, right? It's like, okay, I'm tired at the end of the day, but if I start to think about how it's going to make my day better, I think about that nice clean desk, even that, just that one little win of I just tidy up my desk, complete the day, put away the tools, if you will. I know I'm going to feel good coming into that fresh, clean office the next morning. So that is a winning formula, I think, for anyone to just start with small, even if it was, how long does it take to clean a desk? Even to move the piles off, just to have a clean space to get started is a win to move us in the right direction.
Well, if we want to go with the neuroscience of this, one of the things that has us feel overwhelmed is lots of stuff everywhere. And so if you want to think of this just from a scientific perspective, if I'm walking into my office to start my day and there's already piles of stuff, or it's messy, or I'm moving stuff, and then I turn on my computer and my desktop on my computer is covered in files. And then I open my email, and there's 11,428 emails in there, 7,915 of them which are unread. I'm already overwhelming my brain. So when you say a tidy space makes a tidy mind, or a clear space, whatever, there's sound science with that, because the space impacts how your brain is processing. And if there's too much data that it's already taking in, before you even start responding to your first email or have your first phone call or work on your first piece of work, you're feeling a little overwhelmed. So I know this sounds a bit like your nana saying to tidy up, and I'm being a bit like Donna McGeorge here, tidy up. But really it has such a profound effect on how you feel, and you've then already got some clear space in your brain to get started for the day.
I completely agree. And just this morning, actually, I have this whiteboard that is on my, just behind my desk, and I will often just clear, it's like a place where I'll just go up and clear my mind. Okay, I need to do, as I'm walking out the office, I'll write on there a bunch of stuff just so that it's captured and out of my brain. And often I will let it fills up the whiteboard. It's like, okay, put all that stuff out there. Some of it has to get done. Some of it may be just an idea, but it can fill up that board. And it's a big board. It's like 4x6 board. And the other day I've been trying a different technology to capture stuff. And I thought, well, I'm going to get all that off. I cleaned off the board and put everything, documented everything on the computer. And so it was gone. And then I came in the office this morning and I'm like, what happened? It's like, so did someone take a picture down off my wall? Like it felt like it was cleaner. It was like something was missing. And I was like, oh, right. This thing this whiteboard that's been totally cluttered for at least 2 weeks, black with ink, was totally clean. And it felt like it felt better. It felt cleaner. And really all it was just a clean whiteboard and not all this noise and information sitting there glaring at me every time I walk in the door.
Do you know, so many people ask me for the hack, for the easy thing. I kind of refer to it as the Ab King Pro. So I don't know whether this was something that ever happened in Canada, but it's this piece of fitness equipment that fits under the bed or under the couch, and you get it out and it's very easy. You just rock back and forth on it, and suddenly you'll have abs like, Schwarzenegger used to have when he was younger. And the Ab King Pro is meant to be the easy way to get fit without effortless. You don't have to make any effort, and all of a sudden you'll be fit and glamorous and gorgeous. And so a lot of people are looking for the Ab King Pro version of productivity, or even they're looking for rocket science, some fancy new thing they've never heard before that's going to make a big difference. But you know what? Sometimes it just comes back to a clean whiteboard or a tidy desk, or just putting things away. Or I think it was, what's his name? Oh, now I'm having a mental blank. One of the American founding fathers, originator of productivity. But he said a place for everything and everything in its place. And so there's even something about the unconscious ability to have, I just know on my desk where my pens are, where my stapler is, where my hole punch is, all those things, and I put it back where it was. All of those simple little things are the things that make the difference around clear head, clear space, and the ability because that leads to good decisions, which leads to great results, right? That's where we're headed. But there's nothing, I wish I had some super duper thing to tell you, but often it does come back to doing the basics really well and consistently.
Yeah, that's I think that's the tough angle of it, or, is that everybody's looking for the ab queen or the instant fix, the magic bullet, magic pill.
That's it.
And but often in all these areas, it comes down to very simple things. I mean, even working out and getting exercise, it's like if just 5 minutes a day is better than zero.
That's it.
And it can actually make a incredible compounding effect that many never get to see because they don't think it will do enough or do whatever. So cleaning the desk, cleaning the whiteboard, tidying up a little bit is literally, it's like if that's all that got done, that would be actually pretty good.
Yeah. Yep. And it was Benjamin Franklin, by the way. He came into my head just as you were talking.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So now that we've got a couple of strategies here, it's like a clean desk, start our day by ending our day well the day before and planning out what's going to happen the next day, clean the whiteboards. what are some of the other things that we start to work on in order to get this time back that we're talking about?
So one of the things that when I was doing the research for the book, I discovered something, I call it the 15% rule. And I found that there was lots of instances of people who pretty much operate at 85% capacity for their day. So a lot of us think that, a good life is that we're 100% busy, our calendars are full 100%, we're 100% on 100% of the time, we have to be available to everyone all the time. And reading about people who had extremely successful lives, careers, whatever, by operating just at 85%, I found that really interesting. And the idea is, and this stems back from studies done way back, in the early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century, around time in motion, when they were first, the Industrial Revolution, Henry Ford, when they were working out what was the optimal time for people to do everything from heavy lifting to thinking, and then how much break time did you need in order to recover fully to be able to then continue on. And of course, there's lots of different numbers have been flown around, but what I took from this is we always need to have some kind of buffer in our day. Now, 15% of an 8-hour workday is about an hour, just over an hour. And it's a little bit like, if someone cancels a meeting, that feeling of relief that we have, right? Like, meeting's been cancelled, we go, a whole hour I've got to myself. Well, I want everyone to have one of those scheduled in their diary every day for several reasons. One is so you can look forward to it. Hey, here's an hour where I can play a bit of catch up, so I can maybe plan ahead, get a bit ahead of the curve. It might be that you do it in the last hour of the day. I'm okay if you make that one do double duty. It's also your hour of power at the end of the day. Don't really mind, as long as it's all yours to do with what you wish and you're not having any obligation to anyone else. It's just for you. And so this idea that we protect a bit of time as a buffer was one thing. The other thing was, and this is a bit hard to do, how do you operate at 85% across the day? How do you manage your energy so you're not using it all, so you don't get to the end of the day, fall in a heap, and that your family are getting kind of the worst of you? And I don't know about your listeners, Michael, but most of the small business people I know, they do it for a lifestyle reason. They do it so that they have choices. If I say, why do you run your own bookkeeping business? They'll probably say, because I don't want a corporate job. I want to be my own boss and I want to be able to have a great balanced work life is typically what people run their own business for. And yet sometimes we forget that. And so we have these really busy days. We dedicate it to our business, fall in a heap at the end of the day, and we can barely communicate with our family at night because we're so exhausted. So this idea of how do we just pull back a little bit throughout the whole day is what I'm all about. And so one of the ways you can do that is to structure your day according to the clock in your body and not the one on the wall. So I don't want to get all philosophical on us here, but, time is a bit of a construct, that it's an external construct. It's not really a real thing, versus the clock in our body, which runs our circadian rhythms and manages the flow of energy, and when our brain is more switched on and when we're more mentally alert, for example, in the morning versus having physical dexterity in the afternoon. And when we follow the clock in our body, we tend to operate throughout the whole day and in a more balanced way. We don't, those feelings of stress and out of control and overwhelm are when we're trying to get the system that is our body to do things that it's just not geared to do in that moment. So I'm going to pause because I just said a whole lot of stuff there. So I'm going to pause and see which one of those you'd like to pick apart a little bit, or what comment you have, Michael.
Well, I was just thinking it's an interesting concept about the circadian rhythm, and it had me thinking about not all vacations are the same. Many of them are worse than being at home working, but, busy, going, moving here, there, everywhere, right? It's like, it's not much of a vacation. But the vacations, the true ones, where it's like there's not a lot planned, it's actually just unplugging and relaxing and just there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do, it's just let it go. That is where it is very relaxing and refreshing. And I find that it's like every day I have energy throughout the entire day. I sleep better and all these good things. And really, in a sense, to me, that's what it occurs. It's like I'm following. If I need to have a nap, I have a nap. If I'm going to go, if I feel good, I'm going to go do something else. Whatever the case may be. And in our built-up world that the world has lived in for the last 100 years, 200 years, whatever, we've not been working on that. We're working on someone else's schedule, and it's like we got to work from this time to that time, get these things done, all of that good stuff. But really, we are moving into an age of where a nap in the afternoon or going for a walk in the day, whatever the body needs or is calling to, is actually becoming possible.
Well,
more and more.
I loved, when we were working from home, we could duck off for a bit of a nap in the afternoon, right? And we've kind of, I think of our cousins in Canada. So Canada might be a bit different, but certainly in Australia, we were colonised by the British. And to some extent, I wish we'd been colonised. Well, I don't wish we'd been colonised at all. That's a whole other political conversation. We won't go down that path. But the idea that if the Spanish had colonised Australia, we have a siesta climate. And so if the Spaniards had got to us, or even maybe the Italians, maybe we might have had more of a siesta culture where you'd work for the morning and then you'd nap in the afternoon. Now, there's dozens of cultures in the world that do have siesta cultures, that they recognise that it's important to have a nap in the afternoon. I spent a couple of years in China, and it is absolute common practice to go and have some lunch at about 12 o'clock. And then I saw this in the office. You put your head down on the desk and you have a bit of a nap for about 20 minutes. And I think those of us in Western cultures, we're missing out on that. I think it's really important. And your body wants to do it. We've all had the experience of getting to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and your brain's just not switched on, and you do just want to have a little kip. So I reckon if you are working from home and you're running your business from home, I'd be building that in. You will power through the afternoon. Trust me on that one.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I mean, when I was growing up, I worked with my dad. He was an electrician, ran his own business, and we would literally we'd have our lunch and we would have a 20-minute nap, no longer. And if you didn't sleep, that's fine, but I had to have the nap. It was like lie down on this board here and sleep for 20 minutes, and then his clock would, I don't even think he had an alarm. It was just, he was like a clockwork. Get up, go, and it's like a little groggy at first, but boom. Then it was like refreshed, clear thinking, finish off the afternoon and clock out and go home. And so I think the challenge today is that we're stacking this 85% and over. It's like I'm the worst enemy, is that I'm saying more, get more done. And it's almost like if I go for a walk or I take maybe a siesta, it's like I'm not getting as much done in that day that I feel like I want to get done, because I'm stacking way too much on. And maybe this is a good transition into this other bit that you talk about, which is this overcommitment. I'm overcommitting to the amount of things I want to do in a day, let alone a week. And I think that robs me of my ability to maybe think more clearly, have more energy, bring more to my family at the end of the day, because I'm overcommitting.
This overcommitment thing it's a mix of two things. It's this idea that working hard is what makes you successful. And so I actually think it's working consistently is what makes you successful, not hard. So I kind of rail against this notion of more, and I rail against the notion of hard. I think that's not useful anymore. Technology was meant to take the hard out of work. It was meant to make our lives easier and give us a bit more leisure time. And I think all we've done is a little bit like during the pandemic. We had an extra 10 hours of leisure time. What did we do? We filled it with work. And so I think there's a tendency for that. So that's one aspect of it. The other side is that we have downtime coded as wasteful, or boredom coded as bad. And you kind of alluded to this before in your story about your vacation, where you are at liberty to go with the clock in your body because you don't have any other obligations that day. And so I make a challenge to people around, could you allow yourself to be bored for an hour every day? What would that look like? And of course, people freak out around that. Like, and I'm sure some of your listeners just vomited a bit in their mouth at the thought of being bored for an hour. Who's got time for that? But for me, it's like, are you too busy now to work with? What would happen if a new and amazing client came into your world? When do you have the space to talk to them? Because no one's going to wait around for 6 weeks for your calendar to be free, right? So I just think this idea that we overcommit in the service of busyness, of success, whatever our version of success is. Whereas I think we need to stop and really rethink, why am I even in business? What do I really want to achieve out of this? What are my top three? What are my values? What are my top three reasons for doing what I do? I'm a big fan of threes. So therefore, what are the top three things I need to do this week to in service of that? And therefore, what are the things I need to do today? And once I've done those three things, what would happen if I knocked off for the afternoon? Now, you're thinking, from a military person, this sounds a bit cruisy. This doesn't sound a bit right, but this is the muso part of me. If you get done what you need to get done, you can just stop, right? And I don't think we stop enough. We don't stop and breathe and take stock of where we're at enough. And that's a bit of a high horse I can get on and ride that pony for some time.
Well, it's a good one. And I think it's something that I know for sure our listener, many of them, needs to take on, because there is no shortage of work. There is no end to the work. The work never stops coming. And this thought that if we do more, we'll get ahead or get more done. But the reality is that it's not the case. It's by doing less, we can actually accomplish more. And it's hard to experience that unless we've done it. And I know I've done both and continue to flip-flop back and forth between having really good setup where it's like things are flowing and in flow state and lots of things, great things get done, tap into the creative mind, all that good stuff. And then also just be like, work too long, work too much, and really not feel good, or, not taking care of my body. Not a good side to be on and working in. So this is definitely a topic that I know is very, very important to everyone that's listening. And it sounds like you've got some really fresh takes on how to live our life in a productive way and really make sure we're doing the right things to get to get us on a track or on a pathway to getting what we want in life.
Well, yeah, that's a little bit of my mission. My mantra that I'm currently working with now is days down, dollars up. And it's a bit of a game I'm playing with myself around, can I sustain my current earnings but work less days, as in being on duty less days or less hours? That's kind of, can I sustain it? And then what can I grow it? Is it possible to make more money by working less days? And the answer to that so far, my experiment's going very well. The answer is yes. And it's an interesting, for bookkeepers, I sometimes think, or for lots of people in small business, I don't think they think it's possible. I think they think there's a limit or a finite amount of time or money or whatever they can earn. And I'd love to challenge your listeners to go, is it possible to do days down and still either maintain my earnings or increase my earnings, days down, dollars up? I think that's why we're in business for ourselves, so that we can create a bit more leisure time for ourselves.
I agree. I absolutely love the challenge. I hope our listeners take it on. Days down, dollars up. And what a great little metric to have to inspire us to get there. And I think there's some strategies. Now, you have some great strategies, and I'm sure some great resources that our listeners can start to learn more about you and get your book. Can you tell us a little bit about where they can find out more about you and perhaps get the book that you've written?
Sure. So DonnaMcGeorge.com is where you'll find most things out about me. Specifically, DonnaMcGeorge.com/shop is where you'll have access to my books. But I think it's probably better as international listeners to this that you just go to your Amazon. I'm on Amazon if you want to get hold of my books, and that's easy because then there's local distribution around that. Whereas you don't want to be paying shipping from Australia. Promise you don't want to do that. And a lot of my productivity stuff, blogs, etc., sit on a website called theproductivitycoach.com.au. And I've been told I'm a shameless self-promoter, so you'll find me on most social media platforms, where if you follow me, you'll find, I write articles all the time, both for media and for and just blogs and articles and things across social. So my name's quite unusual, Donna McGeorge, MC George. You won't find many people in the world with that, so I come up on most searches pretty quickly.
Beautiful. Well, this is absolutely wonderful. Your book is The One Day Refund. Take back time, spend it wisely. And Donna, I really have to say thank you. And on behalf of our listeners, we appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Michael.
Beautiful. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.